being descendants of Noah's son, Japheth. You can read about Ashkenaz, Gomer, Japheth, in Genesis chapter 10, verse 2 and 3. Now, this is a fact that is known among intellectuals in Jewry. Now, the people Israel, on the other hand, and we did a series on the fingerprints of Israel, and the word Jew and Israel are not synonymous. We also did a message way back on the subject of the Gentiles. These are very confusing words to people who profess to be Bible believers. But the people Israel were to be called by a new name. You can read about that in Isaiah chapter 62, specifically at verse 2. It was at Antioch, for example, that they were first called Christian. You can read about that in Acts 11, verse 26. They were to leave their name for a curse. You can read that in Isaiah 65, specifically at verse 15. And as John the Revelator said in Revelations chapter 2, verse 9, and chapter 3 and verse 9, I know the blasphemy of those who call themselves Jews, but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, and do lie. Well, enough on that subject. Let's go to part 5. The protocols depict our social, political, and economic situation of today so accurately that according to the famous Russian dissident, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, they must have been written by the mind of a genius. Now, he wasn't making reference to mere commentaries about the protocols, many of which avoid quoting substantial portions of the protocols so as to more easily malign and discredit them. The fact that a program of economic conquest was well underway long before any of us were born is confirmed by those protocols. A very few brief excerpts I will offer in connection with today's message. We'll start with protocol number 1. Now, I'm going to ask you to note how this excerpt that I'm going to quote parallels that of Albert Pike, Sovereign Grand Commander, Southern Jurisdiction, Scottish Rite, Freemasonry, in his great tome, Morals and Dogma, 861 pages of it, page 95, that I have cited in previous broadcasts, regarding the proportion of ignorant, poor, and unreasoning men in the world versus the few, wise, rich, and reflective men. A ratio which he said was at least 1,000 to 1. Do you remember that? Here's what the protocols say on page 10 in my edition of the protocols, if you happen to have a copy of it. Quote, it must be noted that men with bad instincts are more in number than the good, and therefore the best results in governing them are attained by violence and terrorization, and not by academic discussions. Now, these are very brief excerpts. Okay? We're going to go to page 11, still at protocol number 1. In our day, the power which has replaced that of the rulers who were liberal is the power of gold. Okay, so now you see that gold is going to be maligned by the populace who think that because these certain people have acquired gold, that there's something inherently wrong with gold. Okay. They say on page 11, the despotism of capital, which is entirely in our hands, reaches out to it a straw that the state, willy-nilly, must take hold of. If not, it goes to the bottom. So they're saying that they have the power of gold, that gold is capital, and they're correct. Capital is wealth used to beget more wealth. Wealth, on the other hand, is all goods and services produced by human exertion, which have an exchange parity in the marketplace. Federal Reserve notes are not wealth, nor are they capital. Federal Reserve notes are fictitious capital. Gold is wealth, and gold is capital, so they are correct. We'll go to protocol number 3, page 17, a brief excerpt. All people are chained down to heavy toil by poverty more firmly than ever they were chained by slavery and serfdom. From these, one way and another, they might free themselves. These could be settled with, but from want they will never get away. End quote. Okay, we'll go on to page 19 now. Quote, we shall create by all the secret subterranean methods open to us, and with the aid of gold, which is all in our hands, a universal economic crisis, whereby we shall throw upon the streets whole mobs of workers simultaneously in all the countries of Europe. These mobs will rush delightedly to shed the blood of those whom, in their simplicity of their ignorance, they have envied from their cradles, and whose property they will then be able to loot. Have you ever seen a brownout in a major city in America? And what happens when people get out there and decide that, hey, we can start looting the stores? Yeah. Protocol number 6, page 24 and page 25, very briefly. It is essential for us, at whatever cost, to deprive them, that's us, of their land. This object will be best attained by increasing the burdens upon landed property, in loading land with debts. See, your land isn't yours. First blank, Communist Manifesto, abolition of all property and land, application of all rents of land to public purposes, right? Okay. Now that's debts, both public and private. You see, tax levies, bond issues, for the new school, the new library annex, for the municipal pool downtown, all of that is to load your land with debt, to deprive you of property. Property is the absolute right, or the right, to possess and use. Americans don't have the right to possess and use. Our land has been mortgaged. Even if you don't have it mortgaged personally, it's been mortgaged for you by your politicians. Protocol number 9. We have fooled, bemused, and corrupted the youth of the Goyim. Now that's an interesting word. See, that means cattle, they say. And what I found even more interesting is that my spell check program does not underline that in red. My spell check program knows the word Goyim. Does yours? We have fooled, bemused, and corrupted the youth of the Goyim by rearing them in principles and theories which are known to us to be false, although it is by us that they have been inculcated. Page 29. Have you been corrupted? Did you accept ridiculous theories like maybe modern economic theory, or maybe the theory of evolution? They inculcated it. That's what they say. Protocol number 16. Classicism. I'm going to emphasize economic classicism, or classical economics in this case. Classicism, as also any form of study of ancient history, in which there are more bad than good examples, we shall replace with the study of the program of the future. Ours is a generation that does not look back, said Bill Clinton, on behalf of the ruling elite. They go on to say, we shall erase from the memory of all men all facts of previous centuries which are undesirable to us, and leave only those which depict all the errors of the government of the Goyim. Page 48. Protocol number 20. Today we shall touch upon the financial program which I put off to the end of my report as being the most difficult, the crowning and the decisive point of our plans. Page 54. Economic crises have been produced by us for the Goyim by no other means than the withdrawal of money from circulation. That's from page 56. They go on in page 56. You are aware that the gold standard has been the ruin of the states which adopted it, for it has not been able to satisfy the demands for money, the more so that we have removed gold from circulation as far as possible. End quote. This was written in the late 1800s. They hadn't gotten the gold out of the United States. Their plan was to first work on Europe, whoever these people were. But you see, by 1934, they managed to get the gold out of circulation in the United States. Look around. Is gold in circulation, hand to hand, as money? Absolutely not. And with legal tender laws, it never will be. They go on. With us, the standard that must be introduced. Listen to this now. This is the Populist Social Credit Program. With us, the standard that must be introduced is the cost of working manpower, whether it be reckoned in paper or in wood. We shall make the issue of money, they mean fictitious money, in accordance with the normal requirements of each subject. You and I are the subjects. Adding to the quantity with each birth, or every birth, and subtracting with every death. That's from page 56. Look at this program of social credit. That's a scheme that receives space regularly given to it by the American Free Press, particularly Mark Anderson. Okay, welcome back to the final segment of Datum Line. We were at protocol number 20, very briefly going through a few excerpts. I'll continue with protocol number 20. Quote, every kind of loan proves infirmity to the state. That's interesting, because the United States certainly has plenty of loan obligations. doesn't it? Over $16 trillion in debt, rising $1 trillion a year now. Loans hang like a sword of Damocles over the heads of rulers who, instead of taking from their subjects by a temporary tax, come begging with outstretched palm of our bankers. Foreign loans are leeches, which there is no possibility of removing from the body of the state until they fall off of themselves or the state flings them off. But the goy states do not tear them off. I got to stop. That word goy, G-O-Y, my spell check program doesn't highlight that as an unknowable word. How about yours? Even if you might be a goy and don't know that that's what you are, there's somebody who does. And spell check even knows you. But the goy states do not tear them off. They go on in persisting in putting more onto themselves. Let's raise the debt ceiling, right? So that they must inevitably perish, drained by voluntary bloodletting. My comments. While each country's central bank could create imaginary loans to itself, the Wall Street Journal has long reported on the more binding loans from one country to another. Protocol number 21, page 59. Quote, we've taken advantage of the venality of administrators and the slackness of rulers to get our monies twice, thrice, and more times over by lending to the goy governments monies which were not at all needed by the states. End quote. Now, these very brief extracts from the protocols provide a glimpse into a program of economic enslavement. While they may appear fanciful to many people, others have found the protocols fascinating, if for no other reason than their great understanding of man's sinful nature, by which we are so easily manipulated. In our next broadcast, I think I may go back into the protocols just to deal with the subject very briefly of how they deal with and promote mass dissension, how they create blind mobs. See, we have a new study in college, don't we? Sociology, where people study mass psychology. Why do you suppose we have the study of mass psychology? Because people behave differently in groups and in mobs than they do individually. Edward L. Bernays, the nephew to Sigmund Freud, also Jewish, by the way, didn't care for the mobs. He considered them stupid, ignorant. And he came up with the concept of the engineering of public consent. Edward L. Bernays was the father of PR, public relations. The U.S. government, major corporations, even the CIA, used the techniques and the understanding that had been gained by Edward L. Bernays, which were taken from Sigmund Freud's study of psychoanalysis. How marvelous. America is a giant social engineering experiment from the top down. We're at the bottom. The view isn't too good from where we are. They're at the top. The view is far more interesting, I'm sure. You've been listening to Datum Line. I'm Bruce G. McCarthy. I hope this has been informative and at least interesting for you. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.